With all this complexity, if you are not approaching it scientifically, you're going to be out of it. It's not like this is a magic thing that you're going to always do right if you're struggling to apply science in a consistent way. But you have no chance otherwise if you think about all the complexity that goes into this. And this is why we need, as I said, to bring forward not just one or two, but dozens and eventually hundreds and thousands of people who are capable of being leaders of this revolution on all different levels and are continuing to learn more and lead better as they do. This cannot be made by just a small handful of people. We can start with a relatively small number of people, which we are, but then we have to go out and build this whole thing and get this whole process going where wave after wave, more people are becoming part of the revolution and are learning to become leaders, because everybody can learn this. Now look, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to pretend that if you've been involved for 6 months, you're going to be able to lead on the same level as someone who's been working at this for decades. And assuming the person who's been working for decades has been working for it in the right way, which gets me to a question you raised about the Cultural Revolution in the party and why we had to have one, because the party had gone off track and it had lost its revolutionary orientation. Look, one of the things I talked about, the 1968 and that whole period of what's generally referred to as the 1960s or whatever, there was a great revolutionary upheaval then, but then the world changed. There wasn't a revolution in this country. The Vietnam War ended in a certain way that wasn't, in the short run, it was a great defeat for U.S. imperialism and a good thing, a very good thing for the people of the world. But then the way things went in the world was not that the revolutionary people. I remember the first time I met Huey Newton, back in, I don't know when it was, 1966, I guess. And I told the story in my memoir. I went to a cultural program, African-American cultural program at the local community college. And he came up to me because I was, I guess, one of maybe two white people there. And he came up to me and said, "Who are you, Socrates?" Because I had a beard and so on. And I said no, and and I guess he thought I looked philosophical or something. And but then I remember we started talking, and he said, "Are you in this group?" And I said, "No." And he said, "That's good, they're not revolutionary." "Are you in that group?" "No." "That's good, they're not revolutionary." But then when he started talking about revolution, the idea he had was sort of that in the third world there was this wave of anti-colonial struggles and revolutionary wars and so on. And so that, as he put it to me then, 2/3 of the people in the world are on our side. So we're bound to win. Well, that was kind of a naive understanding. Look, I don't have time to go into the whole thing, but Huey Newton played a very important and advanced role at a certain period. But all of us were, very undeveloped in our understanding and not approaching things scientifically very much at that point. And when things changed, when this wave of anti-colonial struggles ebbed and turned into something else, and then socialism was lost in China, when capitalism got restored there, which is something that was a major development in the world, although they don't tell you about it in those terms. They act like it's still communist or something because the party still calls itself communist. Anybody can call themselves anything they want. The question is, again, scientifically analyzing what are they actually doing? They've restored capitalism there. That's what they're doing. So they can keep the label communist because it's politically useful to them at this point. But that doesn't mean they are communists. You look at the actual content of what they're doing and scientifically analyze it. So all these things were happening that were, and then there was an assault, a concentrated assault, particularly beginning with the presidency of Ronald Reagan and everything associated with that, beginning in 1980, an assault on everything that the 1960s had been, all the positive things that the 1960s had been about. The struggle against racism and white supremacy and the struggle around women and the right to abortion and the oppression of women, all that, and on and on. All these things came under a concerted attack from a powerful section of the ruling class. And, with all these changes in this country, and they were, doing what we used to call reversing verdicts. In other words, people through the 60s learned a whole lot about the history of this country that I was speaking to at the beginning of my talk here, and about the role of this country in the world. A lot of people learned that stuff, and then there was a concerted attack to say that all that was wrong, and to re-propagandize people with the notion that this is a very special country, a shining city on the hill, American exceptionalism. This country wasn't founded on slavery, it was founded on freedom, all this kind of stuff. And then there was all along that a concerted, determined struggle to slander and distort the experience of socialism, not only in the Soviet Union, but especially in China, which was the most advanced experience we've had of a socialist society, even while there were real shortcomings there. So the effect of all this, we don't live in a, isolated chamber. The revolutionaries and the communists in the world don't live in an isolated chamber where what's happening out there, we go out and try to change the world, but the world doesn't affect us. We're, part of this world and affected by it, and all this everything I was just describing, wave after wave after wave of counter-revolutionary political and ideological assault on everything positive about the 60s and all the great experience of socialism, and in particular China and the Cultural Revolution. All that begins to wear on people, and you start thinking, well, we were for revolution, we're still for revolution, we're still for socialism and communism, but maybe that's going to happen some other time or some other place. Right now, we're just kind of going along, keeping on, raising the banner. And also, people were still skating to a large degree on what had been the understanding coming out of the 60s. I talked about the viewpoint that Huey Newton put forward in talking to me. And it had an influence on me, a positive influence. It pushed me in the direction of revolution, just to be clear. But it wasn't a real correct scientific understanding of what was going on in the world and all the contradictions. And if you came out of that period, here's what you sort of thought if you came out of that period from the 60s. There was this whole wave where more and more people were becoming more and more alienated from and defiant against the system and wanting a radical change and having revolutionary sentiments. It went from, thousands to millions and millions of people. So George W. Bush was part of that generation, but he doesn't count. A whole generation of people went that way, including in the middle class, and the university students. Millions of them. And you there was a song by, I can't remember the name of the group right now, I'm kind of tired. Quicksilver Messenger Service. This song, What About Me? And it was basically about, look, me, meaning us, we're everywhere. We're in your factories, we're in your schools, we're even in your army. What are you going to do about me? I believe, and I had a line in there, I believe the revolution is close at hand. This was they weren't quite, Bob Dylan in terms of their impact in society. They weren't quite Jefferson Airplane, if you know about them. But they were a significant group, musical group, that came out of the Bay Area, doing this song about, I believe the revolution is close at hand. And pretty much on right on about what that meant in general terms. But there was kind of this understanding, this is going to keep going and going and going, and more people are going to get with it. And eventually it's just going to become so big that somehow we're just going to kind of, wash them away. Nobody, maybe not everybody certainly, would have articulated it exactly that way, but that was sort of the sentiment and the basic understanding. And then when all that ebbed and it didn't happen, people became very disoriented. And even the communists, even in the party, a lot of people were still going along with that kind of outlook, and when that's not what's happening, then you start to doubt everything. Well, maybe we were wrong, since it's the masses of people who make revolution, and the masses of people are not in a revolutionary mood. I guess we're wrong about revolution. all these kind of things. And, at a certain point, it became clear to me, if we keep going like this, we're going to throw the whole thing away. And that would be, a tremendous betrayal of the masses of people. Because one of the things that was very positive that did come out of the 60s was that you did have a revolutionary communist party. It was formed out of that whole experience that could play a vanguard role in actually working toward a revolution, the revolution that was needed. And here it was about ready to just totally go down the drain. And what a betrayal that would be. So that's why we had to have a cultural revolution in the party to say, we got to get back on the revolutionary track. And in order to do that, we have to become much more scientific. We have to really scientifically dig into what goes into a revolution. What is the problem and what is the solution? And all of its complexity and all the contradictions that have been talked about. And that's a continuing struggle. And look, the reason that I wanted to do what we're doing here today is because we need a lot of new people to come into this revolution, become part of this revolution, help to solve the problems of the revolution. I know you might be saying, well, how am I going to solve the problems of the revolution? I just heard about this 6 weeks ago. Well, everybody starts somewhere, and everybody has things to contribute. And we really need people to become part of this revolution. And, like I said, people should start with what they, can readily do and feel confident doing, that can contribute and learn more and contribute more and keep advancing. And come in at the point which you're convinced about all of this, including the atheism, come into the party and help to strengthen the party to be the revolutionary vanguard it needs to be. And meanwhile, go out there and work among broader numbers of people, even while you're learning and struggling and determining whether you do agree with all of it. Help bring forward more people to be part of this process so that we can actually very quickly, and I don't mean in a week or a month, but we don't have indefinite time. Look what's going on in the world. So that we can move to where there are thousands of people organized into this revolution. And believe me, if there are thousands of people organized into this revolution, all acting in a unified way, I don't mean like, I think the same thing as you, I don't have any ideas of my own. No. But I mean having a scientific approach. Having a scientific approach and struggling together to recognize and solve the problems of the revolution. If you have thousands of people who are doing that, you're going to influence and impact the whole society in a very big way. So this is what we need. Look, I've said this before, it has to be understood in the right way, but the millions and billions of suffering people in the world are counting on us even though they don't know it. And a lot of them will tell us that we're wrong and you don't know what you're talking about. I was going to swear, but I've done enough swearing for today. But you don't know what you're talking about. That's not going to get anywhere. Nobody's down with that. Even all those people who tell us that even though they don't know it, they're counting on us in a real sense because what is represented by what we're talking about and grappling with here is the only way forward out of this madness for these masses, millions and literally billions of people, whether they know it yet or not. So this is a responsibility that we're all called on to take up and contribute in whatever ways we can while we're learning more and struggling with each other and struggling to understand things more deeply and saying what we think is wrong if we think something is wrong and fighting it out. I don't mean this way. But I mean, struggling it out to figure out what's right and how to go forward. This is what we all are called on to do. And to go out and get, what we're called on to do most of all is to go out and bring forward a lot more people to become part of this with us.